Good evening, everybody. We're here for a city council meeting. It is April 2nd, 2018. We'll start this meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum. Okay, thank you. And now we'll have our invocation by Debbie Pack, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Father God, we just thank you, Lord, for the absolute celebration yesterday of a risen Savior. Father, we thank you for that sacrifice for us. Mighty God, we just lift up our law enforcement and we ask prayers as they cope with so many of the things that go on in this community and beyond. Lord, we just know that sometimes things that we feel shouldn't happen do happen, and Father, we just ask that we would lift them up so that they would be able to protect and serve us, as well as our military. Father God, I just thank you for the opportunity to have the freedom to pray and come together as a community. Lord, we just lift up the leadership in this community as they have so many things to make decisions on, and we just ask that there would be a unity and an understanding of each other, and that the communication would be clear minds and clear communication. And we just ask for wisdom as decisions are made, Father, with the leadership. We thank you, Lord, for the volunteers that come forward to give of their time and their service. And Father, we just thank you for all that we have, as there's so many in the community that have very little. We just ask that you would protect them, those that need housing, those that need food. And thank you, Lord, for those that are in the school systems and they're teaching our kids. We just thank you, Lord, for their willingness and their commitment to our children and our families. And we ask all of these things in your name, Jesus. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to
the States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now we have the adoption of the agenda. This is a time when the City Council can adopt the agenda as written, or they can make changes to it.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion to approve by Solomon, second by Lewis. All in favor of adopting the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'm going to slip down front for a proclamation. Can we have our 911 telecommunicators come forward, please? I have a proclamation to read here in recognition of National Public Safety Telecommunication Week. You may or may not know this, but when you have an emergency and you call 911, you're talking to one of these folks here or someone like them who gives up holidays and weekends and works all hours of the day and night to be there for you. And they're not just operators that connect you with people. They are public safety professionals who may instruct you on how to save a life in your own home or how to gather important information so that the first responders know how to deal with the situation. And furthermore, all of the first responders that are out there today, whether it be police, fire, ambulance, other emergency services, emergency management, search and rescue, all of that. These folks are connected to them and coordinating their efforts. And so they're really the backbone of public safety in our communities across America. So here's the proclamation. Whereas the City of Rapid City recognizes the significance of the 911 dispatch center to the city and surrounding community, and whereas emergencies can occur at any time requiring police, fire, and emergency medical services, and whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and preservation of property, and whereas the safety of our first responders is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from citizens who telephone the Emergency Services Communications Center. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the first and most critical contact our citizens have with emergency services. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are a vital link for our police officers and firefighters by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them with information, and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of the Pennington County Emergency Services Communications Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas our public safety telecommunicators display compassion, understanding, and professionalism on a daily basis while supporting local first responders. Now therefore, I, Steve Allender, Mayor of Rapid City, South Dakota, hereby proclaim April 8th through the 14th, 2018 as National Public Safety Telecommunications Week in Rapid City, and urge all Rapid City residents to participate in and show their support.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being here tonight. Dispatchers are your lifeline, so be nice to them. I remember my training officer telling me this when I was brand new, and it didn't take me long to find out why. As first responders, we trust dispatchers with our lives at times. We trust them to obtain necessary information to ensure a safe response to everyone involved. The community trusts that when they dial 911 on the worst day of their life, help will arrive. Trust in these dedicated public servants is what keeps our system working. Who else in the room can monitor 2 or 3 computers, 2 or 3 phones, multiple radio channels, de-escalate intense situations, and deal with a crabby police officer all at the same time? Many times dispatchers are the unsung heroes, the comforting, reassuring, calming voice on the other end of the line, and the conductor behind a safe emergency response. First responders depend on 911 dispatchers every minute of every day, and we appreciate their dedication towards making our community a safer place. We live in a community that isn't afraid to show support for police, fire, and EMTs. Let's take time to recognize those that are the first to answer the call.
Okay, there are no speaker request forms under general public comment, so we'll go to non-public hearing items 3 through 45, and open public comment on items 3 through 38. Are there any items that need to be pulled from the consent items 3 through 38? Lisa Modrick?
Item 20.
Chad Lewis?
Item number 35, please.
Jason Solomon?
Item number 22, please.
Amanda Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. Items number 16 and 25.
Darla Drew?
Item 19, thank you.
Still time if you want to get a couple more. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent items. Huh?
Sorry, item number 27.
Oh, 27. I was going to say that in a minute. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent items with the exception of 20, 27, 35, 22, 16, 25, and 19. Who?
Mayor, I just wanted to make a short public comment, and I called the office today, maybe I didn't get it taken care of.
Oh. Okay, well, let's if there's no objection, let's back up to public comment and hear from Dan Sefner.
Okay?
Okay?
Wade, can you take these, please? Thank you, Mayor, Council. Usually I get everything out there pretty fast. It's not like me to sit in the background. We all know that. I just wanted to talk a little bit. I'm Dan Sefner, Destination Rapid City, here with Liz Smith, our events director, and I just wanted to talk a moment about our summer series. We're mixing things up a little bit this summer, and you will see as you look at the brochure that I've passed out to you, we have some Thursdays on the Square that we're leaving open. We're leaving it for family, we are leaving the fountains on, we're leaving it for a variety of different things, and we are opening up for the community. We will be doing less alcohol, we'll be doing less wine and beer, we'll be doing less of things and more of others. So we're really calling it music and more. We're going to do more this summer than we traditionally have, but we're really going to mix it up. We're going to back up a few years as we go back into what we did at Main Street Square when we started. As you can see on this list, we have a lot of things going on. We have a lot of variety. We have a lot of things. However, we are involving the community more and more, and that really is our game plan, to mix it up more for kids, families, events, and different things that we want to do for the community. And we all know what Thursday nights have been, and it's a wonderful thing. However, we're going to mix it up a little bit this year. We're going to make it a little more fun is the way we look at it. I mean, there's a lot of things. As you will see, there is Independence Day celebration. We've got the Air Force Band.
Out of Nebraska, yes.
We've got tremendous Air Force Band. We got a lot of things going on. Thursday, July 5th, the 12th, the 23rd, the 30th, available for community involvement. We're working with a lot of different organizations, 501c3s, a variety of different things. We know people are downtown then. Let's invite everyone. Let's get more of that involvement for families and communities, different organizations to join us in the fun that we have. And that is really our goal this summer. That's why I wanted to speak just a little bit tonight and just show the appreciation to the community that Main Street Square has done for everyone and everything that we're doing. As you can see, we're very busy. I take no credit. Liz gets it all because there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And truly, after sitting here tonight, I think I have some stressful days until I see these 9/11 telecommunicators. Are you kidding me? I have no stress at all. Mine is pretty darn simple. So my hat is really off to those people in a very big way for the community of what they do for all of us here in Rapid City, South Dakota. So if you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but usually I get 30 minutes. Tonight they cut me down to 2.5 or 3. So no, I'm really glad to be here and to offer what we're doing at Main Street Square this summer, this season, and you'll see it all in front of you. Believe me, there's more to it than that. We just couldn't put it all on one page. So thank you again for all your involvement and your connection to the community.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, now back to me asking for a motion to approve the consent items minus 20, 27, 35, 22, 16, 25, and 19.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Solomon and a second by Drury. All in favor of that motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And then we'll go to item 16, which is to declare Rimflow Incorporated as the sole provider of swimming pool coping repair and authorize the mayor and finance to sign an agreement with Rimflow Incorporated for Parkview Swimming Pool coping repair project PR 18-6164. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to approve and retain the floor if I can get a second.
Okay, second by Chad Lewis. Go ahead.
Thank you. And Mayor, may I ask the Parks and Rec Director, Jeff Bigler, a couple questions, please?
Sure.
Thank you. So Jeff, thank you for anticipating my questions and being right up to the podium there. Jeff, on this one, it's not often that the City Council sees a request to appoint a specific company as the sole provider. Could you just give us some background as far as why we are doing this as a sole provider on this specific pool?
Absolutely. With me today is Cliff Zekiel. He's our maintenance of the pool and ice arena operations. And this is a request to name Rimflow as the sole source. Rimflow is the maker of the drainage system around the Parkview pool. They are the only company that we've been able to locate that has the expertise and knowledge and equipment and parts to adequately service this system. We have contacted many companies, and this was the only company that we could find that is able to take care of this project.
And I believe you said the pool is over 20 years old?
It was built in 1996.
1996?
So,
And at the time that it was built, I believe, Mr. Bigler, you said that this company actually originates in New York?
That's correct, yes.
And was that the company that installed this originally back in 1996, or did they kind of lose their local
Well, the company,
provider?
the company that installed it was out of North Dakota, and since that time, they have gone out of business, so they are no longer available for this. They did use the product from Rimflow when they installed it originally.
All right. And the anticipated life expectancy after this is upgraded with this coping?
the life expectancy is given at about 15 years.
All right. Thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor for approval of this item. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. On to item 19. Authorize staff to advertise for bids for 2018 lane line painting, project 18-2439. Estimated cost $110,000. Darla Drew.
First of all, I'll make a motion to approve, and I'd like to retain the floor.
Second by Jason Solomon. Go ahead.
Thank you. I have a few questions for Dale Tech, if I might.
Yes, please.
Hello, Dale. Is this our biannual project or twice-a-year project? What do we do? How often do we do this?
That's an excellent question, Alderwoman Drew. This is an annual project that we do, and in the springtime, we repaint every foot of pavement marking on all city streets. On our high-traffic roads, in the fall time then, we go back and we do an additional painting on those. So some streets get painted twice a year. All of our streets get painted at least once a year if they do have pavement markings on them.
Okay, so we have to wait until the asphalt is warm enough, or what is the deal on that?
Yeah, with the paint application, it's no different than painting your house. You don't paint your house in the middle of wintertime. Temperatures are cold, the paint won't stick. Same with our ground surface. We need the temperatures, the ground to be thawed. We need above 50 degrees temperature to be able to do it, and also the streets to be clean as well.
Well, it's $110,000, and I think that's kind of a large expense, so I wanted to make sure I knew what was going on there. Also, how do you decide what's going to be painted white and what's going to be painted yellow?
There is a manual, it's called the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and that is the standard for why traffic signals are consistent throughout the country, why all regulatory signs, stop signs, yield signs are the same throughout the country, and the same applies for pavement markings. There are standards for why there are yellow lines and why there are white lines, and that is because that is guidance given in that manual.
So that's not up to you, huh?
That is not up to me, no.
All right, thank you, Dale. No more questions.
Welcome.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for approval of item 19. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 20. Authorize staff to advertise for bids for bus passenger bench and bus passenger bench advertising. Go to Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I see that Mr. Sagan isn't here. Would I be addressing a question to Dale Tech?
I assume so.
Okay. Hi, Dale.
Hi.
So this item 20, when it popped up, unfortunately, I couldn't be at committee for other reasons, but I did stream it, and one of the things that it brought me back to is the history of Rapid City and pertinent signage and the way signage sometimes is cared for or the lack of caring for it. And I found it kind of funny that this is already back on the agenda, and it's only been a few years. We might even have a few council members streaming or here that can remember those days. But the city had chosen to do a cleanup of advertising benches. It was kind of a thing of the past, and cities were cleaning up their communities by no longer having advertising benches, but having beautification around benches so that it was more inviting. It would detour the thought of graffiti by not having it on. It looks good whether it's in a parkway or it's in front of a business. It doesn't compete with the business. And for $100 a day, I'm trying to understand why the city would retro backwards in time and want to introduce this again. Can you share with me why this is before us today?
Certainly. The reason this is in front of you today is as part of our rapid transit system, our fixed route system, we have a number of bus stops and bus shelters. That is a cost for the city to maintain those benches. When one gets destroyed by one reason or another, either vandalism or a car that hits it or a vehicle or some other accident, it comes right out of the general fund to replace that. One of the main reasons that this is being proposed is it would be a revenue source for the city of Rapid City, primarily the rapid transit. Not only would it require whoever is bidding on the project to maintain and replace those benches if they're damaged, but also gives them the ability to sell advertising on the benches per our city code.
So we currently have how many benches out there that we've paid for without advertising?
I'm sorry, I don't have that number memorized. I want to say it's in excess of 70.
75?
Yeah.
Okay. And of those benches, they're not made for advertising, so does that mean that the city would actually at a cost have to remove and allow a vendor to come in and replace our benches with benches that can support advertising?
That cost would not be the city's cost. That would be the whomever is the successful firm on the project.
But we already own the 75 benches.
Correct.
So we're free and clear on the 75 benches. Now it's just to manage and maintain those benches, which creates a quality of life and certainly a nice view of our community by not having the ads on there. Yes, is a nice answer. I'll answer that for us because this does go back historically, and it's why I'm going to bring it up. I can remember being in business and having this discussion with many business people who would say, you know what, it just doesn't work for us. We go out and RFP it, and eventually the RFP isn't in the sign code, it's not followed, there's not enough enforcement code to manage it, to make sure that it all is good, and then pretty soon they get pretty tacky. And at some point they were replaced, these 75 benches that are out there now, which are earth tone. Very rarely do you see graffiti on them. We do a good job, I think, of taking care of that, and it doesn't invite graffiti. And so it just seems to me for $100 a day, we're truly setting ourselves backwards in time over the course of what previous city council members and mayors and citizens and ad hocs have done in its previous. So I would just like this council to think about the history of why we have these benches that look pretty darn good in our community, why they look good in front of our parkways, and why they look good in front of our businesses, and even for some of those of us that have homes with those benches as well. And we can manage them because they look good, and we can't manage what's going to go on them. So I hope we protect and preserve it. I don't think it's worth the $100 a day, and I think we could find that $36,000 in another way. Thank you.
Amanda Scott,
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask Mr. Dale Tech a couple follow-up questions?
please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Tech, as Alderwoman Modrick said, there was a signage on the benches in the past?
It predates my time here over a decade ago, so I don't, I recall being in town and seeing advertisement on the bench. I couldn't tell you what the history behind that was.
Okay, so you don't know whether the city itself was managing the signage on the benches at the time, or if it was a
yeah.
third party?
I do not know.
Okay. And so I guess why is the staff, I mean, is the primary driving force that staff is bringing forward to put this out for a third party is for the revenue stream, and that's the only reason?
Yes, the revenue stream, plus it also reduce our operating costs by having them do the maintenance. We're currently doing that as well. So $36,000 in revenue plus a reduction in our operation and maintenance costs as well.
So, and I guess my primary question, as far as this discussion goes, is if this is going to go out for an RFQ and some company's going to take over the maintenance of these benches and the shelters and everything else, and I don't know what they're going to bid on as far as advertising, there's enough revenue to be made that someone would want to do this and then take on the responsibility? And does the maintenance, well, first of all, I'll ask you that. Is there enough revenue to support someone bidding on this in order to maintain the property itself?
Based on the conversations our transit managers had with some advertising agencies, we believe that yes, there is enough income to be had off of the advertising to perform these tasks.
All right. So then my second question was, will they be maintaining the, in other words, will they, you mentioned the benches, but some of them have the bus shelters as well.
Correct.
Are they maintaining the bus shelters and the benches?
That is correct.
Because I know the city council in the past had talked about potentially getting additional shelters for some of the bus stop benches. Will there be a requirement to pursue that with the third-party advertising agency that will be taking care of the property?
That's difficult to say at this time. The bus benches, bus shelters are certainly an important feature to have with any transit system. We've installed as many really that can fit where we're not limited in right away. A lot of our stops, there's not a place to put a shelter. There isn't adequate right-of-way width, there isn't adequate clear zone width. So as far as putting up any more shelters, that would not be something that we would discuss as part of this.
If a third-party agency was managing it, will they be able to put signage on the shelters panels as well as the bench, or is it
I don't
simply-
believe so, because the code is very specific about the advertising just being only on the bench.
Okay. So, all right. Thank you. I think that answers all my questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Tech.
Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I direct a question to Dale Tech, please?
Yes.
Hey, Dale. I think Alderwoman Scott was kind of going to this direction, but one thing I wondered is, will we have guidelines for what can be advertised on those benches?
We can, I think. Certainly the contract is not written. We're just getting the authorization to see what this could look like. Certainly we'd take guidance from our city attorney's office as well as working with our community development department to make sure that any signage is within city code.
So, tonight we're just approving the RFP, but I know like political signs, for example, political candidates maybe not being able to do that since it's a city, I see some conflicts. And also just maybe design criteria to make sure that, if there's advertising on there that, it looks good, and that might help alleviate some of the concerns that Alderwoman Modrick has. And so I guess that'd be one thing I'd ask is if we, and I'm all for this to bring in some more revenue, just so long as we have good guidelines so that we have things that are in good taste, that are not in conflict and get political or anything along those lines. So I would say that would be something we should look for as we seek out advertising partners to take advantage of these 75 benches. So maybe that's something for down the road if we actually find a partner.
Potentially, yes.
Okay. All right. Yield.
Chad Lewis.
Make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion to approve and a second by Laurenti. Amanda Scott for minute 40.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a substitute motion to send this back to committee for more information, if I can get a second.
Okay, second by Lisa Modrick.
And may I retain the floor for?
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. So the only reason that I'm want to continue this is I do not believe there's a time constraint to send this out for an RFQ. Is that correct, Mr. Tech?
There is not, no.
Thank you. So with the discussion that happened on the dais tonight, I think it is in the best interest of the City Council to maybe get some more information, to visit with Mr. Tech or the transportation facility and find out the potential interest that this advertising on the park benches is for, because I'm all for another business taking over and making revenue, but I just think we have a few more questions that could be answered before we bring this back to council. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, motion on the floor to take it back to committee for more information. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Okay, motion passes with one no. Item 22, authorize Mayor and Finance Office to sign Amendment Number 1 to the agreement between the City of Rapid City and the South Dakota Department of Transportation for improvements to La Crosse Street at the grade railroad crossing. Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd make a motion to approve, if I can retain the floor.
Who said that? Second by John Roberts.
All right. And a question for Dale Tech, if you don't mind.
Yes.
Dale, I know we spoke about this at committee meeting, but there's a lot of confusion in the community about how this process works. Can you explain the city's role? Can we just decide which railroad crossings to smooth out, or how does the process actually work to make that happen?
The simple answer to your question is no. The city has virtually no input as to what crossings get upgraded. The railroad, the current owner of the railroad, just as any previous owner of the railroad, it's up to them to decide when they're going to make upgrades to those crossings. The way the state of South Dakota manages that is they have an agreement with the railroad that any crossing that requires upgrade or the state manages the project. So they're making sure all the paperwork is done correctly in regards to the railroad standards, as well as their local partner. In this instance, is the City of Rapid City. I mean, there are crossings on state highways and other communities throughout the region. So the state is the agency that handles these projects. So we participate financially too. So part of that participation is cash. We pay the DOT, I believe it's 10% of the cost. And then we also have to do upgrades on our roadways leading up to the tracks to make sure it all ties together nicely.
Thank you for clarifying that. You know, just as for the record, if it was up to us, all those railroad crossings would not be so rough and would have regular maintenance on a more consistent schedule so that we aren't dealing with situations like La Crosse Street, which thankfully is going to get a better fix this go around. But I guess we just want to make that clear. We are pro, I think I can speak for this whole council, we are pro smoother railroad crossings. Unfortunately, we have a lot of hurdles that we have to cross, and we don't get to control that part of it, but we get to partner and try to move it along. And so, thank you. Appreciate that. I yield.
Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. And may I ask Mr. Dale Tech a couple follow-up questions?
Yes.
Thank you. So, and Dale, as Alderman Solomon said, a lot of our citizens, I see it in the paper, I even get comments up in my ward that people are not happy with it. I mean, one of the comments that was made was, you know, they'd vote for a new civic center once all the railroad tracks are smooth. So, but in talking with you on this, I want to give kudos where kudos do belong, and that is we're seeing these come forward because the railroad recently changed ownership, and it looks like the new owners are being more progressive in getting these railroad crossings fixed. Is that?
Yes, it seems as if they are making an effort to make improvements on their system.
Well, I know that sitting on the city council, this is probably one of the few times that I've actually seen anything come forward to actually address the railroads, rather than listening to our citizens just simply complain about the railroad crossings.
Well, there's been a history. I mean, just recently, 6th Street was improved, West Boulevard was improved. I know the state had a project over on Mountain View a year or two ago. There's been improvements throughout town nearly annually. Unfortunately, they degrade over time. You know, everyone's stopped at a railroad as it goes by, and you see how much the track deflects. Well, that happens at the crossings too. So it's a very violent life that those crossings live, and it's hard to keep them in good repair.
All right, well, we might have to maybe get some citizens looking at where we could all start sending emails or something to see if we can get a little bit more attention on those railroads, rather than sending emails to city council members when we can't do anything, or sending them to the poor mayor who says, yeah, wish I could, can't do anything about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. Okay, we have a motion on 22 for approval. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 25, acknowledged February 2018 General Fund Cash Balance Report. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask the Chief Finance Officer a couple questions, please?
Sure you don't want to ask Dale Tech?
I can, but I have a feeling Dale Tech's going to defer to Pauline,
Okay.
so.
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. So, Pauline, this is the February's financials for our cash balance. And thank you for the report, because it does go ahead and show the same condition for the last 4 years. I'm still looking at that the total cash as of the end of February is 4.5 million. I'm rounding numbers. The reserves is 8.5, and we have designated that probably has already been spent. But currently it's showing that we are in a negative deficit based on trying to hold those reserves. Here's my question, because I don't think I've ever seen this get this bad in the 6 years that I've been on here. If we were to actually expend the cash balance down, what funding source would the City Council have to put cash into this general fund checkbook, basically, until we receive our tax payments in May?
Well, quite honestly, we have over $100 million sitting in our bank accounts and our managed money accounts for all the 70 to 80 different funds that we have. We could do a short-term loan to ourselves from any one of those funds. I do want to point out in February we only received one sales tax payment. We did receive the second one in March for about $1.5 million that normally would have been received, so that does have an effect on it. It does look like in March that got caught up. So, but yeah, we could loan money to ourselves from any variety of the funds that have a cash balance.
Okay, so there's nothing restricting us from borrowing from another fund, even if it's on a short-term basis. Do we have to also set up, I assume that has to come through City Council?
It would have to come through City Council. If you wanted it truly to be a short-term loan, you would have to set an interest rate as well as the rest of the terms.
Thank you, and that was going to be my next question, is that we'd have to at least try to put on an interest rate to take responsibility for having our general fund balance go so low.
Correct. You know, and we've loaned money between funds before because it's been cheaper than going to a bank and borrowing, and so we just pay ourselves then.
All right, thank you. So that's good news that we were actually missing one of the payments, because this was a drastic drop after our discussion just 30 days ago, when we had anticipated really only dropping, you know, a couple million per month, and we were going to be good until we got our property tax payment from the county in May. So hopefully this will look a little bit more healthy at the end of March. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, need a motion on 25. Motion to acknowledge by Solomon. Second by Drury. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 27, approve resolution number 2018-027A, a resolution fixing time and place for hearing on assessment roll for cleanup of miscellaneous property. We'll go to Finance Officer Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to remove number 4 for Douglas Williams. He paid his full assessment today.
Okay. We have a motion then to approve with the exception of number 4.
So moved.
So moved by Scott and second by Drew. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 35, authorize mayor and finance officer to sign agreement for independent contractor services for appraisals with Vogely Appraisal for CDBG programs, Simplified Living Program. Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be abstaining from this vote as I am related to the winning bid. However, there was only one person that even applied for it. Just want to make sure, though.
Okay. Can use a motion on item 35. Motion to approve by Scott, second by Drew. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes with one abstention from Chad Lewis. That takes us to the end of the consent items. Now, non-consent items, 39 through 45. Open public comment on items 39 through 45. And we have a list of speakers here. We'll go first to Mike Sabers.
Mike Sabers. I am the attorney for Epic Outdoor Advertising. Mayor, City Council. Before you is a settlement agreement on what has often been called the billboard litigation. This actually started back in 2005. There are 2 boards, well, 4 boards in question. They are called the public purpose boards. They were put in place in 2005. They were able to run motion, and they were able to, and they had to put in 20% nonprofit. Nonprofits such as our police, the fire department, and other, basically 13 years, we've had 20% of these signs doing nonprofit. It's a pretty good return for the city. So in 2005 to 2012, my client complied with all city regulations. In 2012, an ordinance got passed that said, off-premise signs, there shall be no motion. Well, I think the old line is grandfathered in. The city code actually provides for exactly this. If you look at 17.50.080, lawful non-conforming sign. A sign or a sign structure which does not comply with all provisions of the code, which was legal when it was built. So there is no doubt these signs were legal when they were built. They continued to be operated legally from 2005 to 2012. In 2012, they became legal, non-conforming signs. They continued to function without violation of any city code from 2012 to 2015. What changed in 2015? In 2015, the city began to get inundated by a select group of people who dislike billboards, and that's about the understatement of the year. The first thing they said is Epic Outdoor Advertising is not complying with the 20% nonprofit. Well, we provided, my client provided, all the data showing that we were more than complying with the 20% nonprofit. That issue was dropped. The next issue is the city office, the city attorney's office, the zoning office, everybody gets inundated with complaints that, hey, wait a minute, the ordinance says no motion. Well, our response was, it is a lawful non-conforming use. These boards, the purpose of these boards, the use of these boards has never changed. And as a result, they were grandfathered in. Well, we got taken to the zoning board, and I read the South Dakota Supreme Court case. Lamar, Epic, and the city of Rapid City were before the South Dakota Supreme Court. And the South Dakota Supreme Court told this city, you can't retroactively apply zoning ordinances. I read it to the zoning board. I remember Steve Rollinger was on that zoning board, and after they voted against my client, Mr. Rollinger said, the city's never done retroactive, ever, not once. Why are we doing it here? So my client did what my client had to do. We went to court to protect the signs that were operated in conformance with the statutes, and they still are today. Well, the last time we were before you on a potential settlement, that case was pending. We subsequently went to court because that first settlement fell apart. Now we're back. The trial court ruled in our favor. The trial court cited the same case in the same section of that same case when he ruled in favor of Epic, saying you can't retroactively apply zoning ordinances. We come before you with a settlement agreement that we think is incredibly beneficial to both the city, and it also benefits my client. Let's talk about it. No new billboards in this settlement agreement that are not already approved or in existence. Number two, we don't have motion anymore. Ms. Modrick and Scenic Rapid City have been adamant since 2015. No more motion. Well, the only way the city can get rid of motion now is to settle, because the judge has now said we can continue, Epic can continue to run legally. You will have uniformity on interstate. Coming into Rapid City, in Rapid City, and leaving Rapid City, we will have all billboards that are the same size. Actually, the ones in town will still be a little bit shorter. No taxpayer money will be spent on this settlement agreement. You know, Scenic Rapid City ran the city into another lawsuit where it had to pay Lamar a lot of money. Scenic Rapid City has run the city into another lawsuit on the issue of sign credits that could cost but here, my client is saying no money. So at the end of the day, what we're looking...
Mr. Sabers, hold that thought. Your time is up. I understand Brendan Casey also filled out a sheet and that he may want to give you his time. Am I understanding that?
We had requested that earlier in the day, knowing that I can't say much in 3 minutes, or I'm not very good at it at least. Okay. So I can bring Mr. Casey up to yield if the mayor would believe that appropriate.
I think that's fine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I yield my 3 minutes to Mr. Mike Sabers. Thank you.
Some additional benefits to the city of Rapid City with the settlement agreement. How about some finality? Are we tired about talking about billboards all the time? This removes several issues. The city attorney's office can quit designating as much time as they've had to do to try to enforce. You know, Scenic Rapid City has used the city attorney's office to promote their agenda for years at no cost to them, but at great cost to the city. The law is clear. You can't retroactively apply zoning ordinances. My client spent in excess of $20,000 identifying something I learned in my first year in law school. You can't do that. And yet they did it because they inundated the city attorney's office, the zoning office for years and years. So there are no bads associated with this. Rushmore Crossing, our rejuvenated downtown, and hopefully our new Civic Center arena will need advertising. We will have boards to advertise. Rushmore Crossing, especially in the last 10 years, has developed economically and has contacted my client over and over again about wanting boards in this area to get people. These are national chains who employ our employees, who pay taxes, who create a huge tax revenue base. One of these signs that we're asking the council to approve is the Dias Avenue sign. That's basically right out by Rushmore Crossings. The other one is out on Deadwood Avenue. There is already a sign there. The signs that will be approved in this interstate district will be modern. And quite honestly, if you don't like billboards, you should be pleased. Digital billboards, one billboard can run 4 advertisers, as opposed to needing 4 billboards to run 4 static boards. This is only my client's opinion and maybe my own, but I would rather have a modern, new, digital billboard advertising 4 advertisers on one board than having 4 static boards lined up advertising 4 separate. One of the groups before you has continued to promote and offer up settlement agreements. One of the groups, and the people who are going to follow me are the same group that talked the zoning board into ignoring settled law. Driving the city into a lawsuit again. Driving the city into a lawsuit, it lost again. And it's not, quite honestly, like it was some mysterious law that I discovered. Again, this is something that has been settled in this state for a long time. But because they used the city resources, because they used the city attorney's office, because they've been using the zoning officials to promote their own agenda and they haven't had to pay for it, they continue to put the city in difficult positions. The settlement agreement brings about finality. It doesn't cost the city any money. Conditional use permit, that's one of the last terms. Here's my analogy. If you've already been sent through the chute once for a conditional use permit on a new board, what I'm saying is, considering the city will maintain still one of the most strict billboard ordinances in the country, that is the backbone. So you have to use a conditional use permit to get a new sign. As to existing signs, you shouldn't have to do conditional use again when the backbone or the backdrop is, again, one of the most strict ordinance policies in our country. We're proposing to move forward. They would like you to go backwards into litigation. Thank you, Mayor, for giving me even a few more seconds, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next, Mike Kwasny, item 42. There's a number of speaker requests on item 42. If you would, state your name and address as you get up there, and 3 minutes.
My name is Mike Kwasny, 1512 Lark in Rapid City. A little history. I believe the signs were put in on those spots without permission, and that's why they agreed to use the nonprofit messages. I believe that was part of the agreement. When are we going to take the lead? Make the hard decisions. The sign industry has its way for too long. They didn't need to be regulated. We wouldn't have to if they didn't put rows of billboards, if you look along I-190, at the National Cemetery. They had to take down some, I believe. Have any of you seen the empty white billboards all along I-90? They're not taking those down. They were supposed to. Have you seen Dick and Jane's Naughty Spot billboard in front of the school land now being built in Piedmont? Is that going to be taken care of before the kids get there? And now we are going to change our laws so that they can do what they want. Change our vision for our entryways into our city. And if it is that the state laws that affect our path, then what are we doing to address those? Not only the community, but the council. Wait for a group to take it on? We need more than that. Instead, we need to unite the city representatives, the citizens, to change the way this industry is allowed to operate. In the meantime, we need to do all we can to stop this. Please, it is time to stop this. Make them work into our vision. It's not theirs that we should be working into. Closing thought, how are digital billboards along the interstate at 60 to 80 miles an hour, or even 35 miles an hour, any different than me texting and driving? Are we going to end up with the same problem with laws that have to be made, and then they're going to already have them up, and what are we going to do? Because they want it grandfathered in. They got it okayed. Is that truly where we want to go? That's what we're facing tonight. It's time for us to take ownership. It's time for them to come into our vision. Please, think about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Jim Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. My name is Jim Shaw. It was back in 2011 when we had initiated measures on the ballot that were approved by the citizens 2-1, 66% in favor of limiting billboards. The issue is the same today. You know, millions of visitors come to Rapid City every year. They come here for the beauty, the serenity, the tranquility of the Black Hills. But one of the top complaints of visitors is, why are there so many billboards? Some billboards, fine. But too many is just too much. That's what drove us originally and is still our concern today. We want to stop the proliferation of billboards, just as the voters did or said back in 2011. It's important to note, we have never suggested eliminating or taking down any billboards. We just want to stop or limit the number of billboards, the type of billboards. particularly the digital billboards, in effect, a TV on a stick along the interstate. There's an old adage in politics that says, never give up, just keep the pressure on, particularly through your attorneys, through your lawyers. And eventually, the city will give in. They'll compromise. I personally see no reason for compromise here. I think the citizens spoke, and that continues to be the law. There is no reason for us to give in to these billboard companies. Nothing wrong with them. They're a legal operating organization, but as is said in business, there is a term called the excess of capitalism. That's when businesses, free enterprise system, basically will do anything to gain an advantage. In my opinion, that's what's happening here. These companies are allowed to have billboards. We're not suggesting they shouldn't be. We just don't want any more. No more billboards, bigger billboards, motion or non-motion billboards. The people spoke. This council should remember that. Don't change the rules now. Just say no to this unnecessary and one-sided so-called compromise. Thank you.
Okay, next Diane Knutson. And name and address, please.
Diane Knutson, 919 St. Francis Street, Rapid City. Thank you for taking the time to listen. I am asking you to vote against and not settle because the beautification of Rapid City is very important. I enjoy living and operating in a business in this town, and people come here because it is beautiful. You don't achieve that through digital billboards or static billboards. The amount of distraction that you get when you're driving, it's not safe. The whole point of a billboard is getting your attention off the road to influence your decision on with advertising means. And as a business owner, I have actually utilized a billboard and asked them on condition that you would turn the lights off since I'm advertising on your billboard at night. And they agreed to do that until I signed the dotted line, got the billboard, I drove by, the lights are still on at night. So they say one thing and then do another, even when you're paying them. And it can be really frustrating when you have all these billboards that are obstructing the view of the hills, that are distracting, that don't add to the beauty of Rapid City. And we need to stand ground and take control of what we want our city to look like, what we want our first impression of visitors to be when they're driving through the interstate and they see billboard after billboard and sign after sign. Converting static billboards to digital billboards is not a great way to modernize. There's a lot of problems with digital billboards, including adding even more movement and distraction to drivers and light pollution that you have with having those on constantly. It doesn't enhance our life here. It doesn't invite people to view what we have, and it can be seen for miles. That's kind of the point. And so I asked, as a resident, as a business owner that's been through the route of looking at that as a means of advertising, it's not effective. I've also done work for nonprofits, and I don't think that it's a healthy and good way to promote nonprofits even. There's a lot better ways that we can service organizations in our town than just offering billboard opportunities. And let's invite people to Rapid City and give them a great thing when they're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah Jensen.
Good evening, Mayor Allender and members of the Common Council. I'm Deborah Jensen, Secretary of Scenic Rapid City, as well as a business and a property owner here in Rapid City. This settlement offer actually strips away citizen rights and the ability of city government to protect and to preserve citizen rights. Epic Outdoor Advertising wants you to remove conditional use permits on existing billboards. By doing so, you now deprive citizens of the right to even offer input when a billboard is structurally changed in size or perhaps converted. Epic also wants you to remove citizen rights to receive public service messages through some of their billboards. This would be a blow to nonprofit organizations as well. Epic also wants you to ignore city rules regarding billboard size, height, and distance, and actually cut a swath through the city for billboards that would be 2.5 times bigger, 10 feet higher, and closer together. And there's no mention of sign credits in this settlement. Does Epic want you to ignore the rule that sign credits need to be used when building billboards? If you don't require sign credits for Epic billboards, how can you require sign credits for other billboard companies? Does this make sign credits now worthless? How will that affect the other lawsuit that Epic has ongoing with the city right now? This settlement offer actually just stifles the voices of citizens, nonprofit organizations, and the city. Please do not accept this latest offer and continue to defend citizens' rights and free speech. Thank you.
Okay, Susan Nolan.
Good evening, Mayor and council people. It's nice to be before you tonight. My name is Susan Nolan. I live at 1164 Lookout Lane. It's been a very interesting conversation tonight about signs, and I've been part of this over several years. I am not part of Scenic Rapid City. I'm a citizen. I'm speaking on my own behalf. I, too, believe that I'm one of that select group that the Epic lawyer referred to, who I don't care for billboard signs, and I mostly don't care for digital billboard signs. It's like a blight in our community. I have never heard somebody say, you know, I'd love to come to Rapid City because you have such great billboards. People don't say that. They say, as what has already been alluded to, that people are horrified by the number of billboards that are outside our community and that are now inside our community. We need to put a stop to this. I'm not a slick lawyer with a legal background who can tell you how wrong you've done it in the past. But I am a citizen who's lived here for a long time. And I love the nature of our community. You do too. That's why you're on the city council. You want things to be safe and economically viable and beautiful here. So I am asking you tonight to make the hard decision, not the one that is you're afraid because you got a lawsuit, but the one that stands up for the people in our community, for the kids in our community, for the beauty of our community. I am asking you tonight to decide not to cave in to a lawyer who has threatened you basically with another lawsuit, but to do the right thing, the moral thing, the economically, maybe it's not economically feasible, but it certainly is the voice of the people in this community who have said, enough is enough already. Last thing. Most of us find what we want in communities not by billboards. We use our cell phone. We can find all the information we want about what's available in a community on a cell phone. And I would suggest that Mr. Casey go into the cell phone business if he is wanting to promote a service that isn't such a blight in our community. That might be a good way to do it because we don't use billboards. So thank you for your attention.
Jim Peterson.
Jim Peterson, 1203 11th Street, right here in the city. Good evening, folks. Seems like I stood here 13 years ago, different faces, Malcolm Chapman, Karen Gunderson Olson, people like that, good people. And they had a dilemma. The dilemma was that Epic Outdoor Advertising put up 4 digital billboards without a building permit, without a conditional use permit. I mean, I need a building permit to change an outlet in my house practically. So it was a big dilemma. What are they going to do about that? And a lot of people said, have them take them down. But there was a lot of pro-business folks that said, well, you can't do that. And it's unreasonable, and maybe it was. So they came up with an agreement. And the agreement was that Epic would provide 20% of all the advertising on those 4 billboards for community use, community service. And they'd have this special designation, basically. And that was the agreement made. So you got to look at the precedent. I mean, that's the whole concept of stare decisis. You know, you can't just keep reinventing the wheel here. There were good people here that made that decision, the best decision at the time, and what they came up with was this agreement. So we, the citizens of Rapid City, South Dakota, own 20%, 12 minutes per hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, for the decades that those billboards are going to be in place. We own that time. And if you look at Epic's advertising rates, it's like, what's that time worth? Do the math. I mean, it's worth hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's used by NGOs and nonprofits in our community, by our own city agencies. And so this agreement says we're going to go back on that agreement. We're going to go back on the agreement made by Epic and by the City Council way back when, and we're going to give them pro bono. We're just going to give them a resource that's worth a lot of money. We're not going to sell it back to them. If you, as a city council, wanted to get rid of billboards like a lot of city councils have in this nation, and they buy out billboards, obviously this community is not affluent enough to do that, but affluent communities do in fact do that. They not only pay for the cost of the billboard, but they pay for the projected revenue of that billboard downstream for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20, whatever the expected life is of that billboard. So we are going to just give this resource that belongs to me and all the people in the city and you to a private party? I mean, what's with that? And I'm running out of time already, jeez. Anyway, the other thing was that we had an ad hoc committee way back when to rewrite the sign ordinance, and they, met for 6 months, 18 or 19 people, representatives from the agents, from the industry, and they pounded out this statute, and now you're just going to unilaterally say, no, forget that 250 feet that we all agreed on, and we're going to let Epic make these giant billboards like on the rest of the highway. This doesn't seem like a viable concept to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Fred Thurston.
Good evening, Council. My name is Fred Thurston. I live at 6665 West Highway 44. I'm here tonight because I can appreciate all the hard work that you do, the issues you have to put up with, the arguments that have two sides to it. But this argument doesn't. We are a community that depends upon our tourism. And what the tourists have told us that one of the biggest drawbacks in Rapid City and the Black Hills are the billboards. 7 years ago, we had a vote as to what to do. 66% of the city who voted said no more billboards, no more big billboards. I can't help but believe that each and every one of you would love to have 66% of your contingency, your voters vote for you to be in office again next time. We have 66% of the people who voted in Rapid City opposed to the bigger, more digital billboards. Doesn't that mean something? Doesn't that mean we should not go there? We should find a different way. There's got to be a different answer, and not just give in to more, bigger digital billboards. I really hope that you listen to the public, listen to those here that have told you, I'm not a fancy lawyer, I don't have a big speech, but I know that I came to Rapid City, I moved here because I love the community, and I hate to see it cluttered with billboards. Thank you very much.
Okay, and the last speaker is Joe. I'm going to let you pronounce your last name.
That's Joe Lightnum, 2441 Ellendale Drive in Rapid City. I guess I'm in the same place as these folks. I drive the interstates on a route on a regular basis, and I find that it's just a visual blight. The billboards from Sturgis to Rapid City are especially bad. I had just the proliferation of things that have grown and to the south from 79 to Custer. I'd rather see the beauty of the hills for what it is, and I would like to see them, you know, I also understand that you've got, I'm also on the Lights Out Rapid City Committee, and I would love to see lighting and billboards shut down at night. Who's out there? The three guys trying to get their 7th DWI? Those people don't need to see the billboard unless it's for an attorney. So I would ask for your forgiveness for my sense of humor. I do this under nervousness, but I appreciate that you're taking the time to listen to the citizens, and if you'd consider staying with what their desires have been in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comment period. We'll go now to item 39 under ordinances. Second reading ordinance 6243, an ordinance regarding supplemental appropriation number 2 for 2018. Motion to approve from Scott, second by Drew. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 40, first reading ordinance 6242, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. A request by KTM Design Solutions Incorporated for Black Hills Capital LLC for a rezoning from General Agricultural District to Low Density Residential District 2 for property generally described as being located east of North Valley Drive at the western terminus of Homestead Street.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Solomon, second by Nordstrom. All in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now for the Legal Finance Committee items, we'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 41 is to approve, to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign the assignment for the tax increment district number 80 between the North Atlantic Developers LLC, First National Bank, and the City of Rapid City. And I will yield the floor.
Move to approve.
Okay, motion to approve from Drew and a second by John Roberts. Okay, and Amanda Scott.
Sorry, Mayor, that was...
Okay. Okay, motion on the floor for approval. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes with 2 noes, Laurenti and Scott. Okay, that concludes our meeting tonight.
Item number 42 is to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign the settlement agreement between the City of Rapid City and Epic Outdoor Advertising, Inc. I'd like to make a motion to deny. And if I can retain the floor, Mayor?
Okay, we have a motion to deny and a second by Lisa Modrick. Go ahead.
Thank you. Is it appropriate at this time to make a second motion? Because I'd like to make a motion to suspend the time limit on the city council members for this discussion?
Well, you should have done that in the beginning, but someone's going to do it anyway. So what you're saying is you want to suspend the rules for this item?
For this item.
Okay, well, let's go backwards and have a council vote on suspending the rules for this item, for item number 42. Okay? So all in favor of suspending the rules for item 42, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, I think the opposed win.
Then now may I make my motion to deny?
Go ahead. Motion to deny and a second by Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. May I retain the floor?
Yes.
Thank you. May I ask a couple questions of our City Attorney, Wade Nyberg, please?
Please.
Thank you. So Wade, recently the City Council's received an update on the settlement agreement, and it's changed over the weekend since Friday. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a revised agreement attached.
So basically it's City Attorney Joel Landin's opinion that this settlement agreement that comes before City Council tonight is exactly the same as the city settlement that we were faced with a few months ago, in which at that time we were asking for the sign credit issue to also be negated and not continue forward in the courts. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's exactly the same, but it's pretty similar.
Thank you. One of the things that I see different in this one, and I don't necessarily recall it being exactly in the last one, and this is the part that I'm having a hard time with. Before we can even talk about developing a separate sign district along the interstate or looking at the other items on here, I have a problem with this settlement agreement basically asking City Council members to agree tonight to change an ordinance when we don't have the ordinance in front of us, and we're saying, yes, we're going to agree to a change in the ordinance, that the Planning Commission also basically has their hands tied, because even if they don't think it's a good idea, it's still going to come to City Council, and City Council is going to approve it. Is that your understanding of what we're facing in the settlement agreement?
I think that the key parts of the ordinance are spelled out in the agreement, but you're correct in that there isn't a drafted ordinance that's in front of you tonight.
And so if City Council members tonight vote to honor this settlement agreement, saying that they're going to vote in the future to approve an ordinance that hasn't even been written, and that ordinance comes forward in the future and they vote against it, can they be sued individually?
I don't know that that's necessarily the case. It would be still in their official capacity, so it would be essentially a suit against the city for breach of this agreement. If this agreement was approved and the ordinance was not enacted, then it would be more of a suit against the city versus they could name individual council members that voted against it, but it would be in their official capacity as a council member.
Thank you, Wade. So I just wanted to bring this up because this is the problem I'm having with. I will state tonight, people in the audience and people who don't like the signs, I'm not saying I'm opposed to necessarily developing a separate district. What I'm saying is the decision before us tonight, in my opinion, legally ties my hands, and I will not vote for something that I cannot review and study and actually get behind. So my vote tonight will be no, not to settle based on the criteria of this settlement agreement. Thank you, Mayor.
Lisa Modrick.
Thank you, Mayor. I really respect what Councilwoman Scott had brought forward. I had wanted to make sure that all the council members had a chance to actually look at the sign code. Many don't, and this was an opportunity to really review the fact that the sign code is built with layers and layers of community, industry, past city councils, ad hocs, mayors, for decades. I mean, there's layers and layers built from within this sign code, which is why I wanted you to reference and to review it as it's stated. Because that sign code, it is there for anything to include benches or off-premise or on-premise or other types of signage that's within our community. And it's there so that it has some guidelines and some reasonable regulations that are good for everybody, not just for a solo entity, but for everybody, which is why it's been layered for decades. And if you start going back, you can Google it, and you know what, back in 2010, we didn't have one of these. You can Google it now and really get the history on what has been taking place in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and now in this particular time that we're in, that it's been a cooperative effort to make good. So where the size, spacing limitations are, that was an agreement by many people at the table over many courses of time and a lot of leadership behind it, a lot of hours, a lot of our staffing and our attorneys behind it. So to just cut and paste under the threat of continued legal battles would be the wrong reason to do anything tonight without really a good study or a peace of mind that we're respecting those that have been here before us and that we can continue it forward. Because I can assure you, we never thought we would be looking at our agenda in our hand 8 to 10 years ago, and the generations that are coming up next that are sustainability generations, the ones that don't want to pollute the air with cars, that don't want to have electricity the way we use it today, that want to be resourceful, that don't want to throw pollution in the air, they're going to say, well, we're in flying cars. Why do we even have these things on poles? I mean, who knows what's coming, but it's in conversation. And it's happening worldwide. So where cities are going is they're doing more to take care of their communities with regulations that are livable, sustainable, such as the one that we have now. And if we cut and paste a sign code, that would be about as bad a government as you can do. I mean, just think about that. Cutting and pasting without the ordinance, without the changes, without drafts, without understanding of what's going to happen with this. And to create a billboard district, is that really a solution to good behavior by all, by both the industry as well as the community? And the community does have the right to have the input on that. So there's a lot of historic value that we cannot forget. It has to be reminded, and unfortunately we don't get that historic value when we've only been on for 2 years or 4 years or 6 years. It takes a lot of people from the audience that have been participating. It takes a lot of people from our past that were leaders here and worked so hard to create the current sign code as it exists today. So I ask this council to be responsible in government and to not pick and patch, nor to fall short of the vision of the master plan, of our comprehensive plan, by just trying to make good all of a sudden, quite quickly, when you know, because historically it always comes back, that this topic will be here again. It'll be here probably in our lifetime while we're at this council, and those that are next, the ones that are saying, how do we take these down? Just as an example, right now the sign code states that it has to be on one pole, 2 sides max, 250 square feet, 30 feet high. But how many 4-pole and triangle pole and damaged poles like what we had at Dove Church, how many of those are still around? Those never come down. So even though we have modern technology and our code says it's now in one pole, those never change. They're still there. They're there for perpetuity. It's one of the only contracts I've ever heard of where perpetuity is forever. And my goodness, forever is a very, very long time. So I would hope you would consider the fact that we have a sign code in front of us that needs to be protected and preserved, and we need to take this to a judge and allow the judgment by appeal to make the final decision on behalf of this council. Thank you.
Chad Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Make a substitute motion to approve the agreement. And thank you.
We have a substitute motion to approve the agreement and a second by John Roberts. Go ahead.
I'm just saying that, you know, folks, I'm not a huge billboard person one way or the other. I don't really regard them much other than I look for them when I'm in other cities because I'm always looking for a place to eat because I've got kids with me or got to use the restroom or whatever, and they're right there. And the idea that I'm going to pull my cell phone out and do that, it's, you know, first of all, it's technically illegal. We actually voted not to allow people to use their cell phones like that in the state. And actually in the city, we did it before the state did it. Talk about distracted driving. But our hands are tied by state law. Every time we do this, we get sued and we lose. And we keep losing and we haven't won. And we just keep spending the taxpayers' dollars over and over again to learn that we're going to lose again. I mean, it's not even an issue for me as far as whether I like them or not. It doesn't matter. I mean, there's other things we come for this council that I vote for that I don't necessarily agree with, but you know, my job is to try to be a good steward of your tax dollars and to make decisions I think are going to be beneficial to the community as a whole. And one of those things is the idea that we need to quit fighting with all the businesses that come in this town. That, you know, they're viable businesses. Whether or not we like them doesn't really matter as long as they're legally operating. And we have, you know, these billboards wouldn't be there if they weren't being used. I guarantee you, the way that business owners they try to get the best bang for their buck in their advertising dollars. So I don't use billboards. I don't really have anything to advertise right now, but a lot of people do, and they must be effective, or otherwise we're not having this discussion. And unfortunately, I just don't like the message we've been giving to a lot of people in this community when we vote against them or fight with them or ready to go to war with them because they want to do business in this town. And it's not a good message, in my opinion. I think that we need to say, hey, you know, I mean, of course there's going to be some restrictions, but there's some restrictions already that I think are somewhat reasonable. And when we talk about billboards, the billboards that I see, and everybody complains to me, and when I've even seen the images that have been shown to me, they're all out by Box Elder, or they're along the railroad tracks. Well, we can't regulate those anyway. That's not in our jurisdiction. So I just, you know, that's my opinion on this. I'm going to be voting that direction, but it's not because I'm so pro-billboard one way or the other. I don't really care. But I don't want to sit here and keep losing every single time we get up the bat, we strike out. And it's just not a good policy as a city. I don't think to stand up and say, you know, tell businesses, we don't want your business, we're going to fight with you if we don't agree with you, and the loudest voice wins here. I think we just need to be pro-business as possible, and, you know, obviously there's some reasonable restrictions out there, and they're on there. But for my money, this is the way to go, and like I said, Mr. Casey, if you can get in the cell phone business, I could use a discount. I've got 3 kids on mine now, so. And if we start flying cars, my children are definitely not driving.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, if I may ask Mr. Sabers a couple of questions, please.
If he would like to answer, that'd be fine.
Sure. Yes, Mr. Nordstrom.
Come up to the podium, please.
As you're coming to the podium, I just wanted to remind you that the comments made by Alderwoman Scott a little bit earlier is a little bit reflective of my questions to come towards you. Is that, are you aware of a letter written by Brendan Casey to the City Council that says that no new billboard locations within the city limits, municipal limits?
What I know is that letter talked about the fact that there have been either no or just one billboard built in the last 10 years. Also, and I know that the city studied this because I talked to the city attorney about it, Mr. Nordstrom, but along the interstate where we're talking about, there may be one additional spot for a billboard, but that's in question. I don't think the city found a single additional spot where there would be a billboard allowed along the interstate, simply because the city continues to mandate the 1,500, 1,000 requirement, which I can tell you is as big as any requirement I've ever seen on billboards. I don't know if I answered your question, but I tried.
That is somewhat helpful. What it is also involving in your letter or part of the settlement agreement, not yours, but the draft agreement, it is coming up with the comment where I'm really thick, and I don't understand CUPs all that well. Yep. So maybe just a little bit of help on this. But I read this in one portion of saying that the CUP is okay, and then the next section is reading it's not okay and not enforceable. Help me understand what does that all mean?
No, thank you. That's a good question, and I was trying to get through my 6 minutes, and so I went through it quicker than I should. Right now, the City of Rapid City requires a conditional use permit, both if you're going to build a board and if you're going to modify a board. The position in the settlement agreement that's been offered is the conditional use permit would remain, sir, on anyone who wants to build a new board, whether that's in the city, whether that's along the interstate, anywhere within the municipality. And so the conditional use permit, and the analogy I draw is if you've got to go through the chute, and it's a very stringent chute, you shouldn't have to do it twice. The removal of conditional use permit on the existing is, I think the city's fallback and the city's protections is it still has to be a legal use or a legal modification. And how is it legal? Well, it has to comply with the other provisions of a very stringent billboard code, maybe as stringent as any in the country. And so that would be the protections that would continue to exist and which would protect. So you have a conditional use permit on new, but you don't on existing because you've already been through it once, and the city's fallback, sir, would be the existing code.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have for you.
Thank you.
Some of my remaining comments are going to be towards the rest of the audience. That probably a dirty word that's going on right now in the public and all the way from the national to the local level is compromise. I look at this proposal as being a compromise. Probably that's the main reason why I'm going to support it. One of the other things that I heard earlier, and I agree with it, is that our hands are pretty much tied on this effect. If you recall what happened with IM-22, very similar situation. I agreed with IM-22. We needed to get that passed, but the state legislature and it had a different opinion, so they changed it. The only other thing that I see for the Scenic Rapid City Group and citizens that are highly interested in this is change the state legislators, present company excluded. So I wanted to make sure that you've mentioned you've mentioned everybody but the state. You've mentioned the federal level, you've mentioned the local level, but you haven't mentioned the state level. We went down to the state legislature and made a presentation to them, and they did not want to make any changes to it. So I see that as where the next step has to take place, because our hands are tied. That has to be done at the state legislative level. Thank you. I'll yield.
Darla Drew.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of comments from me. As a person that does work in the nonprofit field, I know that digital billboards are an affordable and easy way to advertise. Whether or not they're giving us free stuff or just, they'll give us an ad for every ad we buy. That's kind of common in media, as you guys know. Digital billboards are really very beneficial for nonprofits. And so I can't say that they're a bad thing for a nonprofit agency because they give us a cheaper option. In my view, I grew up in Rapid City, and my view of Rapid City, my scenic view of Rapid City, went away a long time ago. And it wasn't just billboards, it's homes too. Skyline Drive used to be pristine, and now there's developments all over it. I have no problem with developments, I really don't. But billboards don't offend me any more than houses, okay? Because it's blocking my view. It's not what I grew up with, it's not what I wanted. I had Hangman's Hill that I could always hang out on, now it's owned by somebody. I couldn't buy that property, but it doesn't mean I get any say over it because it just happened to be very important to me as a person that I could see Hangman's Hill and drive through Skyline Drive with all the beautiful scenery up there. It's just different. It's different for me. And when I think about this compromise, as Richie puts it, I think we're giving in to saving money because it seems this uses a lot of resources and a lot of time, and we, as you reminded us, we've been doing this since 2005. You were the ones that reminded us how long this has been going on, and we're not winning, and it's time to move on. That's how I feel, and I know I've got a lot of friends out there that aren't going to agree with me on this, but that's the hard part about being on council. You have to decide what you're going to stand for, and billboards are not my issue. So I will probably be voting in favor of this.
Jason Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Couple of comments. For one, to the Scenic Rapid City Group, many of you I know and highly respect, and I agree with the mission of keeping this place beautiful, and I totally get that. My wife made sure to tell me her opinion before I got here about the beautification of Rapid City as well, but in this case, I think we have a rule of law that's at play, and there's a rule of law locally that if that was the end of it, maybe it's a different story, but there is state law out there. And we're losing, and we continue to lose. And the one thing I appreciate about this settlement is the fact that we won't have motion on those billboards anymore. We had 4 that we can have grandfathered in, these motion, and that'll cease. From a public safety standpoint, I don't like motion on the billboards. It distracts me. I don't like on-premise signs that flash at me and give me, make me think police officers after me or something, because it's flashing at me. But I'm not anti-billboard. I think there's a place for them. I think there's a place for reasonable regulations, as we have tried to implement in the past. And along the interstate, I feel differently than I would in a neighborhood. In a neighborhood, I certainly don't want a digital billboard, hanging over my house, and that's reasonable regulation. But on the interstate, in the current locations, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it being a little bigger because it's on an interstate system. If it was in the neighborhood, again, that would be an issue for me. So I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not paying any more legal fees because I'm not sure this is a winning battle. However, we do have another lawsuit going on with regards to sign credits. This has nothing to do with the sign credits, and I think it is worthwhile for us to find out where that's going to lead and if that's a good system and how that works for other communities or not. And so that's an entirely different issue. The sign credits, this does not deal with the sign credits. That's an entirely different issue. Having just traveled last week on spring break down south, saw a lot of digital billboards. Quite frankly, they look a lot better, a lot cleaner than the current static billboards do. They're just better looking. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just, sometimes you have the old billboards that are dingy and that aren't taken care of as well. I'm not saying that is our Epic's billboards, but I'm saying as you travel in other places, you see, that's not looking good at all. But quite frankly, a new modern billboard would be a lot cleaner. I think would send a better signal. And this isn't about whether what our preference is for digital or for static or for billboards at all. I think Alderman Lewis kind of touched on this. My opinion really doesn't matter. I'm not up here to vote on my opinion. I'm up here to vote on what I think the rule of law is and balance that with the needs of our community. And unfortunately, we have a clash here between the law and the majority of our community in terms of how we voted last time. And I know that I was greatly influenced by the motion on the billboards. So that the fact that we're getting rid of that in this situation makes me feel good. So it is tough. Richie Nordstrom said our hands are tied. That's how I kind of feel. Kind of feel like the hands are tied. Like even if we were to continue on this lawsuit, then we would lose. Then we lose the motion. Then we'd lose legal bills that we'd have to pay. And not only that, I think it hurts us moving forward with establishing updated ordinances. Because what I'd like to get us to a place to is that the billboard companies and constituent groups and elected officials and staff can work together to revise billboards moving forward, because they keep changing. Technology keeps changing. Everything keeps changing. I'd like it to get us to a point where I could actually have Scenic Rapid City and Epic and Lamar in a room, and we could actually come to an agreement. Don't know if that's possible, but it would be a paper. But that's where I'd like us to get to. But the reason I'm in support of this settlement is because I think I'm for reasonable regulation of this, but I think it's a reasonable settlement. And and that is actually the bottom line. It's reasonable. We gained some things, and there are other things that we have to let go of. But we're letting go of things that we're probably going to lose anyways. And so, in that sense, it's a tough decision. But that's why I'm landing where I'm landing. That's why I support a settlement in this particular situation. With that, I will yield my 10 seconds.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try not to use as much time as the president of this council, just to once be just a little better than the president. But no, I'm going to give him a compliment right away, because my comments were going to start with some of my feelings about the many, many late nights that I spent sitting up here when I first came onto the council, because we were drafting all of the new ordinances. And some of those were 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning, starting at, I believe at that time it was 7 o'clock meetings. And so I have a great appreciation for the work that we put into doing this. Alderman Solomon's comments about working with the sign companies rings extremely loud for me, because I believe, after being on the council for this many years, that we could have done so much better. We could have saved the taxpayers much more money and be in the same place that we are today. There is no doubt about that, because I sit on this end of the deal and I see it all. I've seen it all. I've spent the hours, I've spent the nights, I've listened to the debates. And we would be, I believe, in a much, I won't say a much better place, but we would be at least where we are today in sign regulation had we sat down with the sign companies in the beginning rather than making this a political fight. And unfortunately, that was honestly the decision that was made, because I've spoke to a lot of those people that were on the council then. They've greatly regretted condoning it and feeding it. So here we are today. Honestly, we get most of the complaints from citizens, by far, it's not even close, with on-premises signs. On-premises signs get more complaints by far. That's been said time and time again. So I'm going to support this because we need to move on. This is not something that we will gain traction on. I am quite sure of that based on my experience in sitting up here and helping develop these ordinances. And I am voting yes because I know specifically what we will be voting on from an ordinance standpoint, from a change standpoint. I'm not doing that blindly. None of us who are voting yes tonight on this are going into this not knowing what we're going to be voting on from an ordinance change. We know specifically what we're going to be voting yes on. And so I will support it. We need to move on, and I yield.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to approve the settlement. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, roll call, please.
Roberts. Aye. Drury. No. Laurenti. Aye. Armstrong. Aye. Lewis. Aye. Solomon. Aye. Modrick. No. Nordstrom. Aye. Drew. Aye. Scott. No. Motion passes 7-3.
Okay, thank you. Item 43, please.
Thank you. Item 43, a request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for BH Capital LLC for preliminary subdivision plan for lots 1 through 26 of Block 1, lots 1 through 26 of Block 2, Lot 1 of Block 3, Lot 1 of Block 4, Lot 1 of Block 5, and Lot 1 of Block 6 of Golden Valley subdivision, generally described as being located east of North Valley Drive at the western terminus of Homestead Street. I move to approve.
Second. Okay, did you want to approve with stipulations?
Move to approve with stipulations, yes.
Okay, motion to approve with stipulations by Drew and a second by who? Roberts. Okay, all in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 44, go ahead.
44. A request by KTM Design Solutions, Inc. for Alta Development, Inc. for a preliminary subdivision plan for Lot 1 and Lot 4 of Moon Meadows Park subdivision, generally described as being located northeast of the intersection of Mount Rushmore Road and Moon Meadows Drive. I move to approve with stipulations.
Second. Okay, second by Richie Nordstrom. All in favor of approval with stipulations, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 45, please.
Approve award of total bid for 2018 street patching project, project number 17-2411/CIP number 50844, opened on March 27th, 2018, to the lowest responsible bidder, J&J Asphalt Company, in the amount of $221,478. Move to approve.
Second by Lisa Modrick. City Attorney.
I just wanted to note that by approving this, you're going to be waiving a technicality. This wasn't included on consent. The bid form for the low bidder didn't have a total. It had all the unit prices, and they just didn't total it at the bottom. Part of our process requires them to handwrite that in, and so they had just mistakenly not done that. It was actually added up by staff, and the total amount was read at the bid opening, but it doesn't affect the quantity, price, or quality, so it's something you can waive. So that's staff's recommendation.
Okay, duly noted. Having that in mind, all in favor of approval?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, item 46, there are no speaker request forms, so there'll be no need for a public hearing on these items. Consent public hearing items 46 through 49. Would you like to pull any of these items or approve them all at once? Okay, motion to approve by Lewis and a second by Drew. All in favor of approving 46 through 49, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 50, non-consent public hearing items. Second reading ordinance 6241, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of Chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, a request by ACES for Mike Cool of Pennington County for a rezoning request from general commercial to public district for property generally described as being located south of Kansas City Street between 4th Street and 1st Street. Motion to approve by Drury and a second by Solomon. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 51, the bill list, will go to Pauline Sumption, City Finance Officer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and if I might say, it's a little light tonight for this bill list. There are no additions, so the total is that which is attached at $3,857,418.84.
Motion to approve by Solomon, second by Laurenti. All in favor of approval say aye. Aye. Motion to adjourn. We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any problem with that?
No.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
I think that's how they describe it.